I've co-founded 2 YC companies and learned a lot in the process, so here are 9 key takeaways from Y Combinator. Number 1, start small. It can be easy to focus on big companies that you might be competing with in the first days of starting your company, but that's a big mistake. Big things have small beginnings. Every company starts as nothing more than an idea, but what makes big companies get really, really big is that consistent compounding growth over a long period of time. Growth rate is by far the most important factor in a startup success. It's what every venture capitalist values most when considering an investment, so you need to start thinking about growth immediately. Focusing on growth rates instead of absolute numbers can be extremely motivating. This is because the smaller you are, the easier it is to have a high growth rate. If you only have a few hundred users, doubling that number in a month is completely doable, and that will start compounding pretty quickly. As you get bigger, doubling every month might not be possible, but 20% monthly growth is usually sustainable for companies with strong product market fit, and 20% monthly growth actually works out to a 10x increase over a single year. I've personally seen this with my YouTube channel. The number of subscribers is still really small, but I've been growing the channel 20% per month on a very consistent basis, which is extremely promising. So if you're watching this and you're not subscribed, please do me a favor and help me keep that growth going. Y Combinator is just 3 months long, and many enter the program with just an idea or basic prototype. Without fail, the companies that get the most attention at demo day have the highest growth rates. It's way better to be a company that went from making $1,000 at the start of the program to $10,000 in just 3 months than be a company making $1 million without any growth. If you're ever feeling like you're in a David versus Goliath situation, going up against massive competitors, just compare your growth rates. The biggest companies in the world aren't growing 10x in a year, but you can if you build a great product that people love. And that brings me to lesson number 2. Get into build mode. No job or college degree can ever fully prepare you for being the founder of a startup. They're all just a little bit too specialized. Building a company from scratch requires bringing together so many different skills, and this is one of the hardest, but also the most rewarding aspects of entrepreneurship. Paul Graham says that if you want to start a startup, it's good to know about multiple unrelated things. Startups often depend on 4 or 5 different kinds of knowledge, and it's great if they can all be found in just 2 founders. It's rare to start your company already knowing about all the relevant disciplines required to succeed though, so that's why it's so important to get into build mode. When I say build mode, I mean being willing to roll up your sleeves and learn the relevant skills to accomplish the task in front of you. You might be a great programmer, but no one will sign up for the app you built if you can't figure out how to promote it. So you might need to learn how to write compelling blog posts or run digital ads in order to start growing. When I started my first company, I wasn't a very good programmer. I was able to throw together basic prototypes, but I didn't have much experience actually growing a digital product. So I spent months coding and eventually got to a point where I was pretty comfortable with Python. Now, I'm still not an expert, but I know enough to be dangerous, and that helps me manage engineers effectively. My second time through Y Combinator was a little different. A few months before I started YC, I was managing a large team at my previous company and had lots of support. My day-to-day was mostly management, and I really wasn't in that builder mindset anymore. The first company had scaled to over 50 employees, and it didn't make sense for me to spend time writing code when I had a whole team of talented developers who were way better than me. As soon as YC started, I really focused on shifting back into build mode. Since I was comfortable programming, I spent time learning more about marketing and branding. I figured out how to produce video content, which is really valuable when you're selling products online. And it also led to this YouTube channel. You shouldn't be afraid to learn new things when you're working at a startup. You're not going to be an expert, but learning about a particular discipline will help immensely when you eventually start hiring. And all of this will be a lot easier if you follow lesson 3. Avoid distractions. Starting a company is a full-time endeavor. In some cases, you can get started while still working a 9-to-5 or finishing college, but once you start taking your startup seriously, you'll quickly realize the value of focus. When I went through Y Combinator, moving to the Bay Area was a requirement, and one that I really benefited from. I was completely broke, which meant living in a fun part of San Francisco was off the table. I wound up moving into a rundown house in Sunnyvale, which isn't exactly a nightlife hub. That was a huge benefit though. With no distractions, I was able to focus entirely on learning new things, writing code, and testing startup ideas. I had tried to work from other places, but never had much success. There are always fun events happening on college campuses, and working from a friend's house wasn't productive for me either. There's a lot of discussion about burnout in the tech world, but I don't think burnout really applies to the very early days of a startup. If you're working on a big idea that you're really passionate about, you shouldn't burn out. When I started my first company, I spent plenty of late nights programming, but it didn't feel like work to me. I really enjoyed the process of learning and building new things that I thought of. Now, this is all a lot harder if you're completely alone, which is why co-founders are so important. And lesson number 4 is to really focus on building relationships with your co-founders. The experience of building a startup is very unique, and it can be hard to relate to if you haven't done it before. This is why entrepreneurs love to work with venture capitalists who have actually started companies before. And having a team around you that feels the same way about avoiding distractions and just building is so important. But you don't need to be spending every waking hour in front of a computer. Getting to know your co-founders on a deeper level is one of the most productive things that you can do. Ideally, you'll already have experience working with your co-founders when you start your company. But it doesn't matter if you've known each other for years or just a few months. You can always build a stronger relationship. Understanding what really motivates a person is vital to any good working relationship, and motivation is a complex and emergent property. Oftentimes, what drives a person to build a startup could trace back to their childhood or upbringing, and you usually don't get to know someone on that level around a water cooler. Not every conversation has to be a psychoanalysis, but building trust between the co-founding team will pay dividends for years if it's done right. Plus, one of the amazing things about bringing talented people together is that their experience can cross-pollinate one another. In that Sunnyvale hacker house, we had people who had studied economics, biology, computer science, and electrical engineering. We had a great time just hanging out and talking about what we each had learned in college and trying to summarize complex topics succinctly. Everyone has different life experiences, and sometimes great things can come out of combining disciplines. Taking advantage of these unique situations requires being ready to iterate, which is lesson 5. We tried dozens of startup ideas in that hacker house, and every time we iterated on our ideas, we got a little bit better. It's always tricky to know when to stay the course versus when to change directions, but iteration doesn't always have to be a binary choice. You might have a crystal clear vision of what your product should look like, but if your users don't love it and you're not growing, something needs to change. You can't be afraid to iterate and course correct as needed. In 2012, nothing was working for us. We spent months building our first product, only to completely flop when we launched, so we increased the pace of our iteration. The next product we launched in just 3 weeks. It failed again, so we decided to try and test a new idea every single week. By speeding up the pace of our iterations, we figured out what was actually required to get feedback on new ideas. Ask yourself, do you need to build the entire product before launching? Or would a landing page do the trick? Sometimes all you need is a blog post describing what you're planning to build. If there is real demand for your solution, people will comment on the blog post and encourage you to move forward. While you're iterating, remember lesson 6, set clear deadlines. Y Combinator is itself essentially one big deadline, demo day. You need to get up on stage and present your company to hundreds of investors. Clear communication is a must, so you have to iron out exactly what the problem is and how you'll solve it. You're also expected to show some metrics, and they better be up and to the right. YC has weekly dinners and meetings with partners, which should force you to start thinking about achievable milestones. You never want to show up with zero progress because you got distracted. Even if your latest iteration takes you in a different direction, that could still be solid progress if user satisfaction has increased. One of the biggest benefits of Y Combinator is the competition. All the companies are on a level playing field, 3 months to deliver the most progress possible. You should definitely have longer-term goals in mind, but thinking in weekly sprints can really help keep you focused on what's most important. And at the early stage, there are really only 2 things that are important: your product and your users. Every week, you want to be making your product better in some tangible way, and then increasing the number of users getting real value from your product. The real value part is really important. There are plenty of ways to game the stats and make it look like you're growing when you're really not. It's vastly more important to get a few dedicated users who really love what you're building, as opposed to adding more and more users who are indifferent about your product. There are tons of activities that feel like work, but actually do nothing to advance your company at the early stage. When you're just a team of of co-founders and an idea, you really need to resist the urge to professionalize, which is lesson 7. This can be really tempting because there's a lot of social pressure to fulfill a set of criteria for what work looks like. Things like an office, business cards, and fancy equipment will all make your company look more professional, but might do nothing to improve your product. If all your friends work at big companies, they might think you're a complete joke for spending all day coding in a rundown hacker house, although that's obviously changed a bit over the last year. Getting an office or business cards may make you feel like you're more of a real company, but for many startups, the customer just doesn't care about a professional company behind the product. They just want something that works and solves their problem. Pretty much every YC company is a mess behind the scenes. No one has it all figured out from day one, so don't stress over this. Every successful company goes through rough patches and has to work through real difficult issues. Entrepreneurship is never easy, but spending time and money trying to make yourself look more professional than you are is often a waste of time. Now, of course, certain businesses might need office space earlier than others, or business cards to sell into enterprises at conferences, but you really should think about whether or not what you're doing will have an immediate impact on your startup. And that brings me to lesson 8. You need to learn how to synthesize advice from different sources. This one's a bit meta, but you have to develop a skill for assessing what's actually relevant to your startup. It's not uncommon to hear an amazing story from a unicorn founder during YC and think that you need to apply their strategy to your business. But this can be a mistake. YC has lots of incredible partners, each with their own unique startup experiences. These experiences obviously affect the advice that they give, and you need to figure out how to apply new ideas to your business specifically. No one will ever know your startup as well as you do, so you shouldn't be afraid to discount a certain lesson about startups if you think it just doesn't apply. Now, startup advice comes in many forms. Some is extremely high level and battle tested throughout decades. This is advice like build something people want, or pursue a big market. Those recommendations are pretty hard to argue with, since they're so universal. It would be very odd to try and build a startup based on the idea of building something that people don't want. But hey, I guess nothing's impossible. Where you want to be more discerning is when it comes to tactical startup advice, like go-to-market strategy. The best way to launch a new startup is constantly evolving, so recommendations like create a high production value video don't last too long. As soon as a specific growth strategy becomes widely known, it usually stops working. Once every startup is making launch videos, they lose their effectiveness. YC can be a bit like drinking from the fire hose. You're getting a constant torrent of feedback about what you're building, and that can be intense at times. If you're not doing well, you'll know it. That's why this last lesson is so important. Enjoy yourself. Startups are a long journey. Dustin Moskovitz, who co-founded Facebook, was once asked what it was like to be part of an overnight success like Facebook. I still love his answer. He said, if by overnight success, you mean staying up and coding all night, every night for 6 years straight, then it felt quite tiring and stressful. No matter how fast your company is growing, there will always be a ton of work to do. In fact, oftentimes the faster you grow, the more work you'll have. There are always growing pains to work through, and you'll be constantly inundated with challenges. That's why it's so important to try and find a problem that you really love working on. And I'm not just talking about the mission. My first company was in the education technology space, and I thought the idea of helping people learn would be extremely energizing. The goal was exciting, but the day-to-day of trying to sell products to schools was completely unsatisfying to me. In order to be able to stay motivated for years, you need to love the mission, the industry, and the day-to-day. This means you should never chase trends. Even if you see a certain type of company getting funded every month, you shouldn't even think about starting a company in that industry unless you're really passionate about the space and could see yourself really thriving in that environment for years. If you want to chat about YC, just leave a comment below or DM me on Twitter. And please check out this recommended video. The YouTube algorithm thinks that you'll really like it.